Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Grace Estrada. This is Psych 92. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 7, Socio-Emotional Development in Emerging Adults. So when it comes to Erikson's psychosocial stages, we are now in stage 6. So we've gone through, developing, making sure that the world is a safe place, starting our sense of independence, feeling like we can initiate our own activities, want to be in stage 4, it's industry versus inferiority. So that's the stage at which, we start to compare ourselves with others and want to feel like we're being productive. And then identity versus role confusion is indicated at adolescence, but it's actually an exploration that continues well into emerging adulthood. And then the idea is that once you are comfortable with yourself, you have an achieved identity in some components, then you're ready to share your life with somebody else. And that's why in stage 6, the primary goal is intimacy versus isolation. So when we talk about intimacy, we're talking about sharing ourselves with somebody else. So the task, according to Erikson, in early adulthood is to find someone you want to share your life with. The idea is to be in a committed relationship, but maintaining yourself, that sense of identity that you developed through adolescence, that you keep yourself as an individual and are able to share with one another, with another person. So in psychology, we have many theories. And one thing you can be sure of is if there are many theories, then the concept that people are trying to explain is definitely an occurrence that happens globally. It happens everywhere in the world, and that's why we're interested in it. So there are 3 main theories that maybe you've heard about, maybe you haven't. So one is the trichotomy of needs by McClelland in 1985. So McClelland said there are 3 needs that every human needs to address if they're going to have good emotional, psychological stability. One is the need for affiliation, meaning that we are creatures that evolved in a way that we need to interact with other people. That's the need for affiliation. Need for achievement. We need to feel like we are accomplishing something in our lives, something positive, that we're moving forward, that we're progressing. And finally, the last one is need for power. The power that McClelland is talking about is the power to direct our own lives. We need to feel that at some level, we have some say in what's going on in our life. So those are the 3 needs, according to McClelland, that if you can have all 3, you'll have good emotional, psychological stability. Now, DC and Ryan has self-determination theory. And what DC and Ryan said was actually, they took a little bit of a slightly different term. Instead of affiliation, DC and Ryan said it's relatedness. Same idea, right? We want to interact with other people. Need for achievement in DC and Ryan's terms is competence, feeling that we can accomplish tasks, that we are actually good at certain, abilities. And then the final one is autonomy, which maps onto McClelland's need for power. The autonomy is that ability to direct certain areas of our life on our own, to feel like we have control. Finally, many of you are probably familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And remember, in this hierarchy, it's a pyramid. And the idea is that you cannot move up on this pyramid until you've taken care of those beneath. So first of all, physiological needs. Those, you have to be able to feed yourself, to have water, to be in a safe, to be in a warm place and be able to rest. Those are the basic needs. Once you have that taken care of, then he says you can move on to safety needs. So safety needs include being somewhere safe and making sure you're not being harmed, right? So if we take care of these basic needs, and this is what we do at Evergreen, we really try hard to take care of our students' basic needs, then you can move on to higher level pursuits. And so right after you take care of your basic needs, Maslow says that you need belongingness and love. Again, that we have evolved to interact with others, and we need to feel that we are loved as well. So that sort of that affiliation that McClellan talked about, the relatedness that DC and Ryan said, in Maslow's hierarchy, it is encompassed in belongingness and love needs, intimate relationships and friends. So these are psychological needs. So you can see in these different theories, all of them recognize that we do need to interact with each other and have a good relationship with others on many different levels. So for us, in terms of emerging adulthood, it's important for you to understand Sternberg's triangular theory of love. It's a triangular theory. So Sternberg likes the number 3, right? You may recall Sternberg also came up with the triarchic theory of intelligence. So he believed very much in that, the power of 3. So the vertices of the triangle are passion, intimacy, and commitment. To Sternberg, passion was the physical component, the physical attraction that you see this person and you very highly attracted to them. Intimacy is the emotional component of being able to share yourself with another person, being able to share secrets, share your dreams, share your day, somebody you can connect to on that level. And then commitment is your conscious determination to stay in this relationship with the other person. So according to Sternberg, types of love can be broken down based on where you are with these 3 different components. So if you have just passion, then he says that's infatuation. Just passion is seeing somebody and thinking they're really cute, right? Don't know anything about them. You haven't shared anything with them. You're not committed to them. It's just kind of a love at first sight idea. Now, if you have passion and intimacy, meaning that you are attracted to them and you're able to share, your life, your dreams, your goals with that person, then we call that romantic love. So intimacy plus passion is romantic love. Now, intimacy alone, meaning you're not necessarily physically attracted to that person, but you have a connection. You're able to talk to them about anything, right? That's intimacy. So that's liking. So passion alone is infatuation. Intimacy alone is liking. Intimacy plus passion is what we call romantic love. So make sure you're learning the different components and the terms, right? So this is something you need to know. Now, let's say you have intimacy and commitment, but no passion. So commitment, remember, is that conscious desire to stay in this relationship with another person. If you have commitment alone, meaning you're going to stay with this person, you're not attracted to them, and you don't really share anything with them, then we call that empty love. Unfortunately, some marriages end up with just empty love, where they've lost the passion. Maybe they're so busy, they're not sharing themselves with their partner anymore, but because they're married legally, they're just going to stay in the relationship. That's an example of empty love. So one thing to note is that relationships can go through the different stages. It makes sense, right? Maybe at first you just see somebody and you think they're cute. So that's infatuation, passion alone. Then you get to talk to them. You start talking to them. Then you can get into that romantic love because you have intimacy plus passion. It might get to a point where you're no longer attracted to them, but you still enjoy their company. So then it becomes liking. So you could go from romantic love to liking. And then let's say you have that ability to share your days with them and everything, and you're committed to stay and maintain that relationship, then we call that companionate love. And so many marriages, lose that passion component, but they want to stay together. They're still best friends. And so that's what we call companionate love. Finally, if you have passion, commitment, but no intimacy. So for example, still maybe really attracted to this person, you're in a marriage or you're in some kind of agreement that you're going to be with them forever, but you're so busy, you don't have time to talk to each other, then we call that fatuous love. The best love is if you have all 3. Intimacy, passion, and commitment. You're attracted to this person. You like spending time with them. You love to share your day, your dreams, your goals with them, and you're committed to stay together. then that is what we call consummate love. And that is the ultimate goal, in terms of Erikson's psychosocial crises, that's the ultimate goal that we want. We want to have at least one relationship where we can say it is consummate love. Any questions? Okay. So in addition to having relationships with others, we still have relationships with parents. In early adulthood, most of us still have our parents, right? So if you have a good relationship with your parents when you're younger, it tends to lead to very healthy relationships when you get older as an adult. It gets complicated, right? So in early adulthood, many of us aren't even, I should say many of you, because I'm not early adulthood anymore. Many people in early adulthood are not financially independent yet, especially here in the Bay Area. It's not uncommon for people in their 20s and sometimes 30s to still live with their parents. When that becomes a situation, it can be a little complicated. And so in order to have a healthy relationship with your parents, if you're still living there, you need to take the time to talk and reappraise the relationship, right? Because sometimes parents will have trouble regarding their children, even if they're in their 20s and 30s, regarding them as adults, if they are still living at home. So that financial dependence can really create some complexity in the relationship. So it's important for children, for the offspring, they're not really children anymore, or young adults, to have that discussion with the parents about, what is it that they are responsible for? Because if you're living at home still with your parents, you should be contributing in some way, but also have those boundaries of where it is. Okay, so I'm 25 now. I'll let you know when I'm going to go out with my friends, but I don't think a 9 o'clock curfew makes sense. That kind of idea. Having those explicit conversations is very important to set the boundaries and really have that a healthy relationship with your parents. Siblings. So sibling relationships are actually the longest lasting in our entire lives. Why is that? Because our parents will pass away, right? So, and our kids don't know us until we're adults. So really, our siblings are the ones that we count on who knew us from childhood well into adulthood. So it's really good, if possible, to have a strong relationship. What typically happens is that when people become adults, their interactions with siblings tends to go down. It makes sense, right? Because, time, our day, it's a zero-sum game. You have 24 hours in a day. You have work, you have other relationships. So oftentimes the interaction with siblings tends to go down. And so it's important as adults to set aside time, maybe every week, maybe every month, to connect with your siblings, again, because they are the longest lasting relationships you will ever have in your lives. So, education, other relationships, jobs, all these things kind of bury their ways. They get into our days, into our 24-hour cycle. So it's important as early adults to sort of establish that regular connection with your siblings so that later in life, you have each other. Right? So usually sibling conflict tends to decline the older we get. And a lot of times, how close you were to your siblings as children will be reflected in how close you were as adults. If there were some issues as children, oftentimes it's because of favoritism, right? So parents do not do their kids any benefits. No, it's not a benefit to any family for parents to have explicit favorites, because that creates tension and a lot of conflict among siblings. So if that's a situation, then again, an explicit conversation really is important to reestablish that connection, because as much as possible, as people get older, it's natural for us to become, to lose a lot of the time that we had with our siblings. But in order to keep that connection, it's important to consciously make the time for each other on a regular basis. And maybe, like I said, every week, every month, just make sure you're connecting with your siblings on a regular basis. This is an ironic picture, friendships, right? So that's the Friends. And then, of course, Matthew Perry just passed away recently. So In early adulthood, what happens is our family blood relationships tend to take a back seat to our friendships. And a lot of times, that intimacy that we talked about, Sternberg's triangular theory of love, it's from friends. Like, these are the people that we are, they're in our peer group, they're going through the same things we're going through. And so it's easy to connect with them. What's interesting is that, when we talk about friendships, we're talking about non-sexual friendships. This is just intimacy in terms of that theory of love. There are differences in the way women and men connect with each other. So usually men, right, biological males, tend to connect through activity. So they'll share little tidbits of their life while they're doing something. So you see bowling leagues, for example, that's popular, or maybe they're biking, and then in between the biking, when they're resting, then they'll talk about their lives, that kind of idea. So oftentimes friendships among men have to do more with something activity based. So their best friends tend to be people that they do some specific activity with. On the other hand, female friendships tend to be about issues, tend to be about so females will make friends with people who maybe have kids in the same school as they have, or maybe they're at work, but there's some commonality, and then they get together just to talk. So it's not necessarily about any activity. They don't have to, do crafts or sew or anything, but they will get together just to talk and connect and share. So that's a main difference that research has shown exists between men and women. Once, someone does find that significant other, again, they're only 24 hours in a day. And so a lot of times the friendship time will decrease as the time with your significant other increases. So this is where, you might find some issues where it's important for your friends to accept this person that, you want in your life. It is also a good idea to listen to them, right? So if they're telling you, no, I'm not so sure this guy's good for you or this girl is good for you, I'm not saying follow them necessarily, but you should not ignore their advice, especially if they are trusted friends. Why would they lie to you? So always think back if you're getting information that maybe you don't agree with. Think carefully about what is the basis for this information. It might be that your friends just don't know this person very well. Well, then create opportunities for them to get to know each other. But sometimes when we're in a passionate relationship, our blinders are on. We don't see the flaws. We don't see the red flags. So it is a good idea to listen, to be open to the opinions of your very close, trusted friends in terms of how they perceive the significant other. So lifestyles. In 1960, only 10% of people over age 25 had never been married. In 2012, 20%. Now it's even higher. I need to get the new data for that. So what we see is the trend is that more and more people are not married. Why is that? Because socially, there's no longer a stigma. There used to be that if somebody, especially a woman, was in their mid-20s and they weren't married yet, they're called, quote unquote, an old maid. So there was a stigma for not having a partner. Now, as people get more educated, they tend to get married later. Marriage is a legal contract. So people should very well be considering that when they decide to get married, because once you get married, you are legally responsible, financially responsible for each other. And so that's a serious decision to make. Also, there's more acceptance for just cohabiting, more acceptance for being a single parent. So again, that stigma is gone. As people get more educated, they tend to focus on their careers and education for the first, up to 30 years even of their life, because graduate school can take quite a while. And so because there isn't this social pressure to get married anymore, what we see is the trend for a larger and larger percentage of adults over 25 to be single. So when we talk about interpersonal attraction, what we're really looking at is the desire to have a relationship with somebody else. So it doesn't necessarily even mean a romantic relationship. This could be even a friendship. Believe it or not, when we choose our friends, there is a level of attraction that is present as well. So the more physically attractive somebody is, the more likely others will want to have a relationship and get to know them. The closer they are. So when you go into a classroom and you choose your seats, oftentimes the people you talk to in the class are going to be those right around you. And so that's what we mean by proximity. The proximity will also have an impact on whether or not you become friends with somebody. So self-disclosure is just, that willingness to share about yourself. If you can turn around and talk to somebody in class and you can say, hey, how was your day? And you just start sharing with each other and have that empathetic communication that builds friendships. So even just exposure psychologically has an effect on us. We tend to prefer things that we see frequently. And so if you sit in the same location every class and the same people sit around you, just seeing them on a regular basis actually makes you more likely to approach them and be friends with them. Similarity. So we tend to remember that homophily idea in adolescence, it goes on into early adulthood. We tend to want to be friends with people who are similar to us on some level. Remember, when we first meet people, first 10 seconds, we are assessing race or ethnicity, we're assessing their age, we're assessing their gender, right? Their appearance. And so the idea in my mind is that we're looking for something in common with them. We are looking for some kind of similarity. Consensual validation is the term that we use when we want to be friends with others who believe the same things that we do. So social media plays a huge role in consensual validation. The algorithms in these applications tend to lead you to others who have similar beliefs. And so that echo chamber can really be magnified with social media. Complementary qualities. If you feel like you're lacking in some area, maybe time management, and somebody casually, you see that they're always very together, right? They're never late. They have everything on time. You might be attracted to them. You might want to become friends with them because they have these qualities that you admire. That's what we mean by complementary qualities. Qualities that you may not necessarily have, but want to pursue. And so you find somebody who has these qualities and hopefully can mentor you or help you learn these qualities as well. And finally, reciprocity of liking. We tend to want to be friends with those who we believe will be friends with us. So, nobody wants rejection. Nobody wants to feel like they're putting themselves out. Reciprocity of liking is subconsciously, we are assessing the likelihood of this person we want to connect with, that they will want to connect with us as well. So we look at a lot of nonverbal body language. If somebody's crossing their arms and is looking down and not making eye contact, automatically we actually realize, it's not a good time to connect with that person right now. So that idea that we also are reading other people's body language, you should be aware of your own body language. If you want to make friends, don't sit down and cross your arms and have a frown on your face because nobody will approach you, right? So you want to also send out the nonverbals that say you're approachable, you're open to friendship. If you don't want it, then you know how to behave, right? So that's what reciprocity of liking is, just our assessment that this person who we want to connect with also wants to connect with us. So external factors of attraction. Here are two women who are classically usually defined as being beautiful, Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn. They were very big in another generation, but they have very different body types. And that's what I wanted to point out, is that it's not whether, you're very, very curvy or really thin. There are other factors actually that play into whether you are perceived as physically attractive. So pheromones plays a role. Pheromones are our hormones. It's actually a smell that each of us has. And based on our DNA, whether somebody will find us attractive or not. And the idea is that the closer you are genetically, the more repulsive you'll find that person's smell. And this is built in evolutionarily to avoid things like accidental incest or things like that. So they've done a study where they have couples, these are heterosexual couples, and they have the men wear a plain white t-shirt and exercise in the shirts. So they're sweating, right? They're releasing their smell. Women in these relationships, I felt kind of bad for them, but they later had to smell these shirts and see if they could identify their partner. And it turns out that those who could identify their partner, they were in better, stronger relationships than those who could not. Right? So the idea is, so their partner's smell, even though it was sweaty, was not repulsive to them. They were biologically compatible. And so that's the role that pheromones actually plays in terms of physical attraction. There are also certain global concepts of beauty. You know, one of them is symmetry. So no matter where you are in the world, how symmetrical you are, meaning if there was a, visible line put down in the middle of your face, how much they mirror each other, that's a sign of health, and that's viewed as attractive, right? So the more symmetrical somebody's features are, that's a sign to others that they have good genes and that they can have healthy offspring. For females, fertility is a huge sign. And this is why, blondes tend to dye their hair, right? Because a natural blonde, as people get older, the color gets darker. And that's a sign that they're getting older. The older women get, the less fertile they have. So hair dye actually serves to trick people into believing that you're younger than you really are. Pheromones, going back to pheromones, the perfume industry was designed to overcome that repulsion that we would feel if we're not biologically compatible with someone. So if you really want to know if you're biologically compatible, have your partner engage in an activity where they won't be doused in perfume or cologne. Take them swimming, go work out with them or something. Do something where for some period of time, they won't have these artificial smells on them, that you smell them for who they are, because that will give you an idea if you are biologically compatible. So for males, it goes back to the ability to support the family. So still, symmetry is important. Strength is important for men because, again, the idea is, can you protect the family? That is underlying what women are looking for. So it's either, showing in stature that you are powerful enough, strong enough to protect them, or have the financial ability. Those are the very basic evolutionary components to attraction. Does this mean that somebody who is older is not physically attractive? No, that's not what it means. If someone, isn't a multimillionaire, will they have problems finding a partner? No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about the most basic components and why it appeals to people. So here is a picture I like because it emphasizes it's not about your size. It's really about the waist-hip ratio in terms of for women. So scientifically, it's been determined that the waist-hip ratio needs to be about 0.8 to be ideal for having children. So it's not about what size. These pictures show women from size 8 to size 16. And so the bigger your waist gets, the bigger your hips should be in order to bear children in a healthy way. So really, that's what it boils down to, is that we want to make sure that the hips are wide enough that should a woman have a baby, that she can actually survive the birth. That's what it's about, and having healthy children. So again, this is not to say if you don't want to have children, this matters. This is just what research has established has been traditionally viewed as highly attractive. So sexual scripts. A sexual script is the unwritten rule that a society has for sexual behavior. And so again, this is going to be culturally defined. I'm going to talk about Western culture. So contemporary sexual scripts. Romantic ideology is often the script that we hear or we see in movies, right? So this is the idea that there is only one soulmate, you have only one person. Being in love is very positive. You know, it has many benefits. That's kind of the idea that we're all raised with. In most movies, males are the initiators. In most cultures, that's the case too. Again, it differs across ethnic groups and cultures. So one example I will give is machismo. So machismo is a sexual script in which men, you know, show that they're manly by being strong. They brag about how many women they've gone out with. They show that they're dominant. So that's a very it happens in a lot of traditional cultures where the men are sort of establishing that they're the authority, the alpha figure. And then for women, there's something called Marianissimo. So this is very prevalent in Latinx cultures, right? Marianissimo is that women are expected to be sexually pure, that they are submissive, they're subservient, you know, like the Virgin Mary in, you know, Christian theology that's why it's called Marianissimo. So these are very prevalent sexual scripts in some cultures, where if you pull out movies from different decades, it's going to be consistent, where you see the guy, you know, showing off that he's very manly, that he's, you know, a hot shot and all this. And the women tend to be pure and very, they're beautiful, right? They're lovely, all these ideas, and that they are going to be submissive to the man. That is a sexual script. I'm not saying it's correct, but it is one that exists very often. So as I mentioned, oftentimes it's men who are expected to be the initiators in terms of sexuality. Now, some more modern scripts that we see, there's a hookup script. So this really started coming out in the 60s, where, you know, sexual freedom, we can be with anybody, no problems, we don't have to be committed to them. So this is the passion component, right? And then there's that idea actually leads to a lot of problems, right? So first of all, if you're going to do that, make sure that you are using protection. There's also the idea of that friends with benefits. So friends having casual sex without commitment. So this is that you have casual sex, you are not romantically involved, but you're attracted enough to each other that you want to engage in that. Again, that's another script that's become more common. A lot of times the approach somebody has to hookup culture is that it depends on how quote unquote old-fashioned somebody is. So I can say I'm old-fashioned. I don't believe in it. I don't think it's beneficial for people. What are some problems with it? Well, usually men are the initiators. His pleasure is more important than hers, doesn't really think about her. And there are different standards for what is considered too much in terms of males and females. Generally, it's more acceptable for men to have many different partners than for women. So again, that is that, you know, cultural idea. What are some risks? Well, if you engage in this, remember that when you engage in intercourse, you're actually becoming emotionally attached to them. Oxytocin is released. That is the love hormone. So when you have an orgasm or anything like that, it actually makes you more open, more vulnerable in terms of becoming emotionally attached to that person. And so with the hookup script, it's possible that you are somebody who will become more emotionally attached than the other one, and then you'll be hurt. So that's a problem. Sometimes based on your culture, maybe your religion, you might have feelings of regret, guilt, and even suffer depression if you've engaged in this. And a lot of times this script is associated with drug and alcohol use. So that's another layer that becomes more complicated and becomes more dangerous. So some problems with sexual scripts. Well, culturally speaking, if you don't follow the sexual script of your society, you might feel abnormal, right? You might feel like, what's wrong with me? Everybody else is doing this. Don't feel that way, right? Because not everybody is doing it. It really varies a lot. There's also a sexual double standard. As I mentioned, women and men are judged differently based on, how they follow the sexual script. So even if one woman has the same number of partners as a man, that woman will be what we call slut shamed, right? She'll be viewed as somebody, oh, she's not discriminating enough. Like, we'll be very judgy on her, which isn't fair, but that's the double standard that does exist, right? So boys who have a lot of sexual partners or more sexual experience are accepted by their peers, but for girls, for females, it's the opposite. Their friends tend to look down on them if they have many different partners. Also, condoms protection is very important. And so sometimes, depending on the sexual strip, depending on the culture and the generation, that one partner is responsible for taking care of the protection. That's not fair, right? It should be both partners need to be mindful of this. Also, first experience. So ideally, the first time that you engage in intercourse, you're going to be with somebody you really care about, you really trust. It should be a good experience. And that isn't always the case with these sexual scripts. It could be that one partner is a lot more assertive, a lot more aggressive, and coerces the other partner into engaging in it. And that is not right. That's actually illegal, right? So you want to make sure it's consensual. With these sexual scripts, women tend to experience less sexual joy. So for females, a lot of it is actually emotional. And if the woman does not have that emotional connection with their partner, then it won't be as much fun for them. So that is something psychologically that we are kind of wired. Now, online dating is huge, especially now. So in 2016, 20% of emerging adults reported using a mobile app, 27% used online dating. When COVID hit, those numbers went, exponentially exploded, right? So online dating really became huge with COVID in terms of just connecting with people. Maybe because people were afraid, they weren't actually physically getting together, but online dating really has changed the whole fabric of connecting with others. And so you can connect with people from across the country, right? Or across the world. You're not just stuck to your geographical location. So in terms of the internet and social networking, it's given us access to a much wider range of people, right? So the idea of proximity is less important now because of the internet. Communication. So one thing to note is when you are communicating online, there's sort of that layer of anonymity. Even if they know your name, you're still a little bit disassociated from it. And so communication can be very different online than the way you would have it in person. People will reveal things about themselves online that they would never have imagined that they would reveal in person. Matching on the basis of traits and interests. So when you fill out a profile, ideally, you're going to be very honest, right? And you're hoping that other people will be honest too, but you actually cannot make that assumption, right? You have to always, if you're connecting with somebody online, be very skeptical, be very careful, because it's very, very easy to lie and deceive others online. So some differences between online communication versus face-to-face meetings. Well, when you're communicating online, you don't really get a lot of sensory cues. Zoom helps a lot, but there are still subtle components that you won't pick up on during an online meeting. Anonymity makes it easier to become intimate. People often disclose more quickly online, as I mentioned. Exchanges can be focused more on emotional attraction than physical appearance, which is wonderful. It really is. That way, you're not actually, limiting yourself and who you're attracted to based purely on physical appearance. Online daters report valuing communication and personality characteristics over sexual attraction. Yes, you become much more easily emotionally attached to people in online meetings versus face-to-face meetings. Online meetings actually, because they can be more frequent and it has that anonymity that people feel more secure, they don't realize they're actually connecting and bonding even more with that person the more that they connect with them. So I do think it's important to take some time to talk about safe dating practices. So the idea here is if you're going to go on a date for the first time and it's somebody you connected with online, if that happens, number one, keep your loved ones in the loop. Make sure people know where you're going, who you're meeting, what time you're going to get there, how you're going to get there. Provide your own transportation. If you watch old movies, you'll see it's like the girl expects the guy to pick them up at home. Don't give your home address, especially if this isn't online, you've never met them before. Make sure you have your own transportation to get there. Even better, have a friend bring you so that you're not by yourself, right? Make sure you meet in a safe environment, meaning a public environment, that if something should go wrong, it's easy for you to get help. Don't leave your food or drink unattended. Unfortunately, there are people who will drug others, right? Get them into a state where they cannot say no or make them very vulnerable. So make sure you don't leave it unattended. Again, if you have a friend there, you go to the restroom, that friend can make sure that nothing's going into your food. Limit alcohol consumption, period. Yes, I understand that sometimes people drink to be more relaxed, but you also make yourself more vulnerable and less likely to make good decisions. So as much as possible in your first date, don't drink alcohol or make it very minimal. Listen to your instincts. Remember, we talked about ways of knowing. Our instincts, remember, our senses take in a lot of information we're not even conscious of. So if you walk in and you feel something is off and you can't put your finger on it, listen to your instincts, find an excuse to leave. Maybe one good way is to arrange with one of your friends or family members to call you within 5 or 10 minutes of the date. And if it's working well, then, they can just say, oh, yeah, and, I'm calling to see if you went to somebody's recital or whatever. Oh, I can't right now. I'll go catch up with you later. Then that's a sign that everything's fine with the date. But, making sure that you have a safe out is also important. So this has to do with planning. Don't give out your personal information, especially online, right? Don't give out any kind of information about you might share your phone number, but you can have a Google number as well. So you don't have to give your cell phone number, where you work, where you live, all of these things. You need to be very careful about the kind of information you're putting out there. Ideally, go on a group date, have a number of people together so that you have some time alone just to see if, it works, but you're also safe because you're with others. Carry some protection. That can mean a number of things, right? That could mean a condom. Hopefully you're not planning to right away engage in sexual intercourse when you don't know the person. Again, very vulnerable. But also even having something on you, a glass breaking pen. There are many devices. You can have something that has an alarm, a personal alarm, just in case you find yourself in trouble. Remember, the idea here is you're meeting somebody for the very first time. Don't lie. So I tell you, don't share wrong information because it's so easy to look up things. And so when I say don't lie, the reason is because if that person is a psychopath, they'll know you're lying and they'll make them very angry, and that will put you in danger. And so there are ways you could just say, I'm not comfortable sharing that right now. You don't have to lie, but there are ways that you can get around sharing things that you don't want to share or avoiding that in a way that is still respectful, but not lying. Bottom line is that nobody wants to be treated badly. So even if it's not working, there's no reason to be cruel. There's no reason to be mean. You can just say, I thought this is going to work out. Really, it's not. And so I wish you the best of luck or whatever, but be kind. Treat other people the way you would want to be treated. If, that other person didn't think that it's going to work, how would you want to hear it? And that's how you should treat other people, right? Just remember, we're all human. Be kind to each other. Also, Google them. So hopefully, if they've given you their real name, you can Google them. I'm sure they will Google you as well. But just look and see if there's anything that might alert you to a potential problem. And if so, maybe change your mind about meeting them alone. Okay, attachment in early adulthood. Similar to attachment when people are young, attachment's important, right? Because of that need for affiliation. So Bartholomew came up with an adjusted way of considering ways that people are attached. Okay, so there are two dimensions. Attachment-related anxiety is when somebody's afraid that they're going to be rejected, right? They're afraid of being abandoned. So when they're in relationships, they tend to be a little bit clingy. Then there's attachment-related avoidance. So these are people who don't want to share anything about themselves. Maybe in the past they've been hurt. And so now they're a little bit hesitant in terms of connecting with others. So these are kind of the two almost opposite ways that people might attach as they're adults. So there are 3 layers for attachment. And this is, I invite you to consider where you are in your romantic relationships. So here's the description. I find it relatively easy to get close to others and am comfortable depending on them and having them depend on me. I don't often worry about being abandoned or about someone getting too close to me. If this describes you, then you are in a secure attachment. What about this? I am somewhat uncomfortable being close to others. I find it difficult to trust them completely, difficult to allow myself to depend on them. I'm nervous when anyone gets too close, and often love partners want me to be more intimate than I feel comfortable being. So remember, that's kind of that layer that's avoidant. So these are people who probably have been hurt in the past and are now hesitant to share themselves with others. So that intimacy component is much more difficult for them. And then there is anxious ambivalent. I find that others are reluctant to get as close as I would like. I often worry that my partner doesn't really love me or won't stay with me. I want to merge completely with another person, and this sometimes scares people away. So that is the anxious ambivalent. So if you have, a number of different relationships, is not necessarily a romantic relationship, you might think about where you are and where you fall in the spectrum. So here is a nice little grid. And here, what we're looking at are 2 dimensions. One is how you perceive your partner. So that's the model of other. And the other one is model of yourself. So your attachment style will really be a reflection of how highly you perceive your partner and how highly you think of yourself. Remember, this is why the identity component is important. So if you see yourself positively, you feel like you're a good person, you have good self-esteem, and you also see your partner positively, then you're going to have a secure attachment, because you believe that your partner is a good person. They're not going to do anything to hurt you, right? Now, if you have a positive view of yourself and not a positive view of your partner, we're going to say that's dismissing. You might feel like you can do better. So that's the idea of really a positive view of yourself is like you have high self-esteem, but then you look at your partner and like, they're not really very ambitious. They don't care about me. They're not very attentive. And so you're not going to have a secure relationship anymore. You're going to be more dismissive, probably more likely to move on to somebody else. Now, if you have low self-esteem, but you think very highly of your partner, maybe you feel like they're too good for you, you're going to be preoccupied. You're going to be worried that they're going to leave you for somebody else, right? So when you don't have a good sense of yourself, not good self-identity, and you think very highly of your partner, that's what you're going to be preoccupied with. You're going to be preoccupied that maybe they're going to leave you. And then finally, if you have a low opinion of yourself and a low opinion of your partner, you're going to be fearful that they're going to cheat on you. Like, oh my gosh, I don't, why are they with me? When you have a low view of them, all these components are going to play into having a fearful relationship. So only the one in the top left quadrant is a secure relationship. The other 3 are all insecure relationships. Here is another way of presenting it, where the horizontal axis has to do with anxiety, how much anxiety you have in the relationship. And then the vertical axis is how much you're avoiding, meaning how much are you, willing to share yourself. So low avoidance means you're willing to share yourself with the partner. High avoidance is, you don't want to connect. So if you are low in anxiety and low in avoidance, meaning you're not worried and you're perfectly happy connecting with somebody, you're going to be secure. So that's the bottom left quadrant. If you have low anxiety and don't really connect well with the person, then you're going to be what we call dismissive or dismissing avoidant. If you have high avoidance, high anxiety, right? You don't want to connect with them and you're really worried about them, then we call that fearful. If you have low avoidance and high anxiety, low avoidance means that you connect with them, you want to be with them, right? But you're really anxious, you have a lot of concerns, then that's where we put you as preoccupied. So in terms of attachment styles, wonderfully, when we're infants, the vast majority are insecure attachments to their caregivers, 60%. Right. And the lowest would be disorganized, disoriented. Again, it ranges a lot in terms of those are abusive relationships. In 2011, when they did a survey on college students, only 41% were in secure relationships. The rest were in insecure relationships. So that really says a lot in terms of where we are as adults, that somehow from the time we're babies up to when we're in college, something goes wrong in terms of being able to connect with people. And so we really need to work on that. And I think a lot of it has to do with our identity, that we need to be secure in ourselves and confident in ourselves as people, as individuals first, before we share ourselves with another person. So Freud, remember, talked about the influences of our childhood and how it reflects into our adulthood. And yes, we do find that our attachment styles when we're younger often influence how we attach to others as adults, right? But it's not only our parental attachments that influence what we become. So it could be attachments to our mentors. It could be attachments to our siblings. There are many different relationships that as we get older, we experience. So if what we find though, is that if somebody is secure in themselves, they tend to have and attract secure partners, right? Not really sure how that is, but we do see that. And then those people who are secure tend to have very good, strong, secure relationships. When people have insecure attachments, unsurprisingly, it's associated with lower satisfaction, more conflict. If you're always like worried that your partner's going to cheat on you, then of course there's going to be conflict. Of course you're not going to be happy if you're spending most of your time being concerned. And so you really need to take a step back and assess your relationships on whether they can be improved. And it takes mindful work to improve relationships. If you're not willing to do that, then you might think twice about, whether you want to stay with that person. So cohabitation is our fancy term of living together, right? Living together without being legally married. And states and countries differ on how long people can live together before they're considered a legal couple, right? So in the States, we have a lot of reasons people cohabit. Very expensive to live, by yourself. So maybe people decide to share expenses and they live together. Sometimes it's a trial or a prelude to marriage. It's something that, you can take your relationship to another level if you live together without being legally entwined. So what we see, our cohabitation rates generally are more frequent and they're longer and longer. So some causes here in the United States, it's a very individualistic society. So they're not worried. There's not so much stigma that happens if you live together anymore. Women, as they get more educated and have better jobs, they have more options. So they don't necessarily want to get married right away. And also just even pursuing post-secondary education might make cohabiting a logical alternative to living alone, right? So again, how frequent this happens and how accepted it is, it really depends on one's culture. So some characteristics of those who live together, usually they're more sexually experienced and active than non-cohabitors. Non-cohabitors usually are living either by themselves or with their parents, so that will have an effect on how frequent they are with other partners. They're less likely than marriage relationships to be monogamous because they're not, legally bound, right? there is a high breakup rate. So more than 50% of people who live together break up within 2 years, and 9 out of 10 break up within 5 years. So that's a pretty high percentage. So does it affect later marriage? Well, we do see that across all ethnic groups, if people live together, there tends to be premarital pregnancy. That just, they're together, they're engaging, they have the opportunity, they have the place. So yes, premarital pregnancy rates definitely increase. Decision to marry depends on the couple's ethnic group and quality of their relationship. It could be sometimes that when people live together, based on their culture, they might be pressured to actually follow through with the marriage. So there is higher pressure, there's higher expectation of the cohabitation to be followed through with actual marriage. And hopefully, if they're having a good relationship, that they will decide to take that step. Former cohabitants who do go on to marry are more likely to divorce. Why? Well, after reading many articles and papers on this, one component that seems to be is the expectations. Generally, in a heterosexual relationship, women expect everything to change once they get married. So they could be living together with their partner, and then when they get married, they have all these ideas of how things are going to change. On the other hand, men tend to think nothing will change. And so that discrepancy in terms of expectations can lead to divorce, right? So really important to have a discussion, whatever kind of partnership you have, before you get married, whether it's same sex or heterosexual, to have that discussion about expectations. What will change and what shouldn't change, right? I mean, people might hopefully have an honest conversation about this to avoid future conflict. So in terms of marriage, it is a legal contract, very strong patriarchal heritage. Historically, remember, women weren't allowed to inherit land, at least here, in Western society. It was only through male heirs. Oftentimes, when women get married, they take their husband's name. And if you think about it, what it is, the origin of that was that women were going from being their father's property, right? They have their father's last name, to their husband's property. There was a time when women were considered chattel, that they were property. And so in many countries, that's still the situation. So when women do that, a lot of women will take, hyphenate now, or they won't take their husband's name. It really depends on the relationship. And I think a conversation needs to be held in terms of what, again, are the expectations. Worldwide, we see delayed or reduced marriage rates, right? So the wealthier countries actually have lower marriage rates. US marriage rate dropped from 72 to 51% between 1960 and 2010. Again, that idea that more people are cohabiting, right? Also, the median age at first marriage has increased 6 years. So people are getting older. Again, the delayed marriage becomes much more prevalent. Marital patterns are really different, depends on the ethnic group. Generally, what are some patterns we see? That women are younger. They marry younger than men. Men need some time, again, depending on the culture, if they're going to try to earn more money so they can buy a house, those kind of things. Women in developing areas of the world marry very young. So in a lot of these developing countries, you go from adolescence to adulthood, right? There's no teenagehood. As soon as a woman as soon as somebody hits puberty, they are marriageable. And that's what we mean by they marry very young. They become wives because, again, in some of these developing countries, it's very expensive for the families to keep their daughter. And so they're eager, unfortunately, to have their daughter marry young. In the United States, women are marrying later. Why is that advantageous? Women who marry later tend to have more opportunities to finish college, job training, or internships. They become more financially independent, and also gives women opportunity to be more selective in their relationships, to explore sexuality and know what exactly she wants in a partner. So who marries whom? What are, we've done a lot of surveys to find out what is it that leads you to decide to marry somebody. So here are the top: mutual attraction and love, somebody who is dependable, someone who's emotionally stable, pleasing disposition, meaning someone who's generally, not unhappy, right? What are some gender differences? Women were more likely to emphasize a partner's earning capacity. Men were more likely to emphasize physical attractiveness. This is very consistent with the research that we see in terms of evolutionary reasons. Endogamy are the social rules about acceptable marriage partners. So this is culturally defined, right? Many cultures endorse homogamy, marriage between people who share social characteristics. So being the same social class, maybe being in the same religion, being the same race, those kind of ideas. They want to emphasize that. More commonality tends to lead to more successful marriages. Arranged marriages are still common in some cultures, and a lot of times it's related to economic opportunities. Interestingly, arranged marriages went down for quite a while, but now they're actually on the uptick again as young people are relying on their families to help them make decisions about who would be compatible for them. In terms of marriage, research really has consistently shown that people who are married, they're happier than people who are not married or even living together with others. There are some intrinsic benefits that happen when you get married. You have a built-in kind of, hopefully your best friend. You tend to have more economic security because you have two incomes now. And oftentimes, you have a family. So you not only have your partner, you have your children as well. What we find is that psychologically, people who are more stable and happy are more likely to marry. And so there's kind of that confounding variable. Is it that people who are married are happier, or are happier people more likely to get married? So we cannot ethically do an experiment on that. So what are the happiness changes? Well, at the beginning, we call that the honeymoon period, when everybody is, just in love and sharing everything. Reality hasn't really set in yet. After the first child, what we find is marital satisfaction actually goes down. There's a lot of stress that's involved with becoming a parent. And then, so the honeymoon period is over there. Women tend to be more dissatisfied than men over time. Maybe their, ideas based on movies and things like that of what it would be like to be married aren't met. And what we do find is that when couples stay together to get through these difficult times, they tend to have really high marital satisfaction. So that's a nice goal to have. Is marriage linked to psychological well-being? Short answer is yes. So in both women and men, again, you have sort of a built-in support system when you're married. Men are more satisfied than women with their marriages and receive greater mental benefits and health benefits from being married. So men who are married actually live longer than their counterparts who are single. So both wives and husbands are more satisfied when decision-making is relatively equal. Right? It's true, because if one person is making all the decisions, then there's a lot of stress related to the person who's making decisions, and there could be resentment from the person who is not making decisions. Women in traditional marriages have the poorest psychological adjustment. So this is in those marriages where they're with somebody who is very domineering, misogynistic, not likely to share responsibilities with them. They have the worst outcomes. And generally, wives may provide more emotional support for husbands than they receive in return. And this is where friendships becomes a big component. So in terms of keeping a happy marriage or relationship, really communication. This is true for any relationship you have. And something to think about. So what are things that kill relationships? Contempt, criticism, defensiveness, stonewalling. So really looking down on your partner is going to kill, your relationship. And the idea is that all of these little interactions actually build up over time and just start to eat away at the relationship. What are some interventions? Well, you can mindfully think about compliments, think about positive aspects to your partner. Work on the friendship component, work on spending time together in a way that is positive for both of you, and improving communication. So share when you are unhappy and why, and stick to the I statements, not the you statements. So I feel like this. When you do that, you're not being accusatory. So that's really important in terms of communication. Intimate partner abuse is an unfortunate reality that we have to deal with. So this is when somebody's in a relationship and they are not being treated well, in maybe emotionally, physically, financially abused. So for women age 18 to 24, that is when they are the most vulnerable. What does it include? Rape, physical abuse, stalking, psychological aggression. A lot of times when men are feeling intimate partner abuse, it's physical violence. So there are women who will beat, their male partners, or other men who will also abuse their partners. So it's a very a serious problem, and it should not be one that people need to be in. They need to escape from these kind of partnerships. Signs of psychological abuse. This is important not only for you to consider if you're experiencing it, but if there's anybody you know who is experiencing this. Humiliation, negating, criticizing. So if the partner is saying things on a regular basis that's very negative and constantly criticizing, that is psychological abuse. If you find that you dread interacting with somebody because it's always negative, that's a red flag, right? Another one, control and shame. So threatening, wanting to know where you are all the time, maybe, getting access to all your passwords so they see what's happening to you. Financial control. So taking away the ability of somebody to have money is a form of abuse. It's a red flag, right? So also trying to make somebody feel like they can't take care of themselves. Oh, you don't know how to do this. That's actually a form of manipulation. Again, a red flag. Accusing, blame, or denial. So somebody being very, very jealous, maybe guilting their partners, gaslighting them, trivializing their feelings, accusing them of abuse, blaming you for your problems, or saying, oh, you can't take a joke. Again, those are very problematic if they're happening on a regular basis, and you really need to think about it. So I encourage you to think about not only your own relationships, but the relationships of people who are close to you. Emotional neglect and isolation. So this is really classic, where people will take their partners away from everybody else, break up friendships, keep them away from family, anybody who might help them, right? So that's really, really important to stay connected with others. Shutting down communication, dehumanizing, keeping you from socializing, keeping you away from friends and family, withholding affection, or disputing those feelings. Those are all signs of psychological abuse. So think about that. If you have a partner who humiliates you, criticizes you constantly, tries to control and shame you, maybe accuses you of things or emotionally neglects you, it's time to have a conversation and really think. First of all, have a conversation with yourself, an honest conversation, if this is a good idea for you to be in, and reach out for help as well. So what are things that happens when you have, these are some ideas of toxic emotional reactions, right? So these are when you interact with people and it's not a really positive experience, right? So interactions are perceived as self-threatening. It's psychological, it happens over and over again. So the whole idea of the intimate partner abuse is it is a repeated occurrence. Oftentimes people will be disconnected, and interacting with these people who are very toxic, it's draining. So if you have a friendship or a relationship where you feel very drained, you dread being with that person, that's a sign that maybe it's time to kind of reevaluate that relationship, and if it's really a good idea to stay in it. So in terms of divorce or separation, there are many ways people approach this. Hopefully it is with open communication. Sometimes people just desert or abandon their families, which is terrible. It's the most cowardly way to end a relationship, right? So sometimes people separate but don't get a divorce. For example, Will and Jada Smith, right? They're in the news a lot because of that separation that they have, but they're still legally married. A lot of times, as a woman has more income and more financial opportunities, she's less likely to stay in a bad marriage. And that's good. I mean, we want people to be in marriages or relationships that are healthy and that are positive. What we do notice is that the younger people are when they get married, the more likely they are to be divorced. You know, people change. So when you're young and you get married, either you're going to grow together or you're going to grow apart. And so if there's no conscious effort to grow together, then a lot of times it will end in divorce. So when people get divorced, there are psychological costs. There's not only financial costs, but there's psychological costs as well. Because women tend to have a lot more relationships outside of the marriage, it seems like adjustment to a divorce is much more difficult for men than women. And so if you look at this, about 17 to 33%, so about a third of women who get divorced don't feel like they have any kind of pain at all. So that's kind of fascinating. Compared with married people, people who are divorced have higher rates of illness, death, alcoholism, and serious accidents. So a lot of times, you know, it is the psychological component that leads to these things. And both divorced men and women tend to have higher rates of suicide after the experience. Okay, other relationships to think about, parenthood, right? When you're in early adulthood, might be thinking about that now. Age of childbearing has changed. It's gotten much more delayed. So now we're talking about people in their late 20s, early 30s having children, whereas before it was women really in their early 20s. And average fertility rate for women is about 2.1. So about women have on average 3 children, right? Sometimes less. That's why it becomes 2.1. And oftentimes it's more educated women get, the better their careers and birth control, either the parenthood will be delayed or they won't decide to have kids at all. Once you have kids, it's important to note that it's bidirectional, meaning the children's personalities also influence how the parents, how they treat their children. So parents have their own personality traits, and we'll talk about that in another lecture. How they grow up. So the way that they were raised a lot of times will influence how they raise their children. And their own the kids' characteristics, you know, whether they're easy, slow to warm up, or difficult, that will influence how parents respond to their children. And socioeconomic factors also play a role into it. You know, it's almost like a U-shaped curve. If you're very low in your socioeconomic status, you're going to be busy working and trying to provide those basic needs for your kids. On the other hand, sometimes when the parents are very high, very wealthy, they don't have time for the kids still because they're doing other things, social events, charity. So oftentimes it's middle-class children tend to have the strongest parent-child relationship. Also, it's influenced by cultural expectations in terms of who are the primary caregivers, the types of responsibilities that each parent has as well. And so here is a nice little graph on the different components that influence parenting. So you have the parent characteristics, the child characteristics, and then you have the contextual and sociocultural characteristics. So that is the end for our discussion on socio-emotional development in emerging adulthood. And I will continue with another lecture on personality. Thank you for joining me.